Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents the world's most prestigious prize, The Inside Story of the Nobel Peace Prize, by Geir Lundestad, narrated by Bruce Mann. Preface. For 25 years, from the 1st of January 1990 to the 31st of December 2014, I was the director of the Norwegian Nobel Institute and the secretary of the Norwegian Nobel Committee. The committee, which has 5 members selected by the Norwegian Parliament, Storting, is responsible for awarding the Nobel Peace Prize, and the Institute is in many ways the secretariat of the committee. I enjoyed my job a great deal. That is why I chose to stay for such a long period of time. The contact with the Peace Prize laureates was certainly the most stimulating part of my job. During my 25 years, I met virtually all of them. I played an important role in the entire selection process, from the submission of all the many nominations for the Peace Prize, to the detailed evaluations of the most relevant names for each year, to the award ceremony on the 10th of December each year. During the Nobel Days in December, I followed in the wake of practically every step the laureates took. The laureates were very different. Some of them belonged on the political left, somewhat fewer on the political right. However, most of them had 2 things in common. They had a vision of what they wanted to achieve in their lives, and most of them had shown considerable political courage in trying to make that vision a reality. Some of them faced the most difficult of circumstances. A few were not even able to come to Oslo to receive their awards. After I left office in 2014, I wrote 2 books in Norwegian about the Nobel Peace Prize. The first one, Fredens Sekretær, 25 år med Nobelprisen, The Secretary of Peace, 25 years with the Nobel Prize, 2015, received a great deal of attention and became a bestseller in Norway. The second, Drømmen om fred på jord, Nobels fredspris fra 1901 til i dag, The Dream About Peace on Earth, the Nobel Peace Prize from 1901 to today, 2017, was more academic in nature and drew less on my own personal experiences. This book in English draws on both these Norwegian volumes. The historical sections are primarily derived from the second. These parts are based on documents in the historical archives available in the library of the Norwegian Nobel Institute, and on literature written by both historians and participants in the process, be they former committee members or the laureates themselves. The sections on the years from 1990 up to the present are derived from Fredens Sekretær. As the Nobel Peace Prize has received more and more attention, many books and articles have been published about aspects of its history. Although some of these have presented useful details about the committee's work, this volume is the first real insider account of the work of the Nobel Committee. The statutes of the Nobel Foundation, which regulate the work of all the Nobel committees and all the Nobel Prizes, state that the varying opinions of the committee members should not be revealed. Therefore, even in this book, the views of individual committee members will not be spelled out. In most other respects, I have tried to be as open as possible. The Nobel Peace Prize plays a role, however limited, in international politics in today's world. It is important that the information about the prize be as complete and as credible as possible. It is my hope that this book will represent a step forward in that respect. Geir Lundestad, Oslo, February 2019. 1. The Nobel Peace Prize, Past and Present. The world's most prestigious prize. On the 1st or 2nd Friday of October, the chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, flanked by the secretary, approaches a microphone and announces who will receive that year's Peace Prize. The Grand Hall at the Nobel Institute is full of journalists from all over the world. As soon as the laureate's name is announced, leading politicians and journalists start commenting on the Nobel Committee's decision. Some will say it was a good decision, others will wonder what the committee was thinking. However, what is striking is just how interested the world is in what the committee decides. Why does the world care about the decision of a committee of 5 relatively unknown Norwegians? The international press does not often devote much time to Norway. The population of Norway is less than 1,000th of the population of Earth. We are on the periphery, far to the north, far from the central parts of the world. There are probably over 300 peace prizes in the world, depending somewhat on your definition of peace. Representatives for many of these prizes have visited my office in my 25 years as director of the Norwegian Nobel Institute. They all had the same 2 questions. Why has the Nobel Peace Prize achieved such status, and how can our prize garner similar prestige? The Nobel Peace Prize has probably never been in a stronger position than it is today. The Oxford Dictionary of Contemporary History describes the Peace Prize as the world's most prestigious prize. American conservative writer J. Nordlinger had a book about the Peace Prize published in 2012 entitled Peace, They Say, A History of the Nobel Peace Prize, the most famous and controversial prize in the world. In it, he is critical of the prize. Nordlinger's heroes, Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush, had not received the Peace Prize. Many of the recipients, including Nelson Mandela, had criticized the USA. Nevertheless, Nordlinger admired the Peace Prize and concluded that no prize, not even the Oscars, had greater prestige than the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Peace Prize is almost certainly number 1, he said. There have never been more nominations for the Peace Prize, with a gradual increase in recent decades. In 1904, the first year for which a full list of the nominees is available, 22 people were nominated for the prize. In 1961, this number had increased to 42, in 1991 to 79. In 2016, there were 376 nominees. The figure increases almost every single year. It is common to have major petitions for various candidates. The record is over 700,000 signatures in support of Bishop Ruiz in South Mexico, who did not receive the prize. The number of media articles has skyrocketed. Every year in my 25 years as director of the Norwegian Nobel Institute, it has taken me longer and longer to go through the growing pile of cuttings from all over the world. For a long time, it was primarily countries in North America and Western Europe that were interested in the prize. In recent decades, it has garnered attention from almost the whole world. This has been crucial for the status of the prize. It reflects the simple fact that while until 1960, or perhaps even longer, the prize was primarily a prize for individuals and organizations from North America and Western Europe, the laureates in recent decades have come from all the continents of the world, with the exception of Australia. From 1990 to the present day, 10 laureates have come from Asia, 8 from Africa, 5 from Europe, 4 from North America, 3 from the Middle East, and 2 from Latin America. 60% of the world's population lives in Asia, and the Norwegian Nobel Committee never forgets that this has to be reflected in the selection of laureates. The committee has been criticized for awarding the prize to so many people from the USA. Americans have undoubtedly featured prominently, but they have not been quite as numerous as many people seem to think. There have been many high-profile laureates in the last 25 years. This has likely increased people's awareness of the prize. At the same time, there have been many unknown recipients. I remember the prize from 1995, when almost none of the journalists present knew anything about Josef Rotblat and the Pugwash conferences. In 2006, the same happened with Mohammed Yunus, not to mention the Grameen Bank. Many of the journalists thought Grameen Bank was the name of a person receiving the prize alongside Yunus. Such prizes for relatively ordinary people are almost always popular in Norway. We value the esteemed common man, or, as one journalist wrote, the fortuitous common man. It is important that there are such laureates, and that the committee does not give in to the temptation to always favor big, famous names. I actually think that the possibility of relative unknowns receiving the prize has also contributed to the status of the prize. We never know who will receive the prize. It was great that the relatively unknown Kailash Satyarthi was honored in 2014 alongside the famous Malala Yousafzai. Once the journalists have sourced the relevant information, these laureates always have an important story to tell. Satyarthi certainly did. It is sometimes claimed that the committee has greatly expanded Alfred Nobel's peace concept in the last 25 years. This is only partly correct. Humanitarian work was included as early as in 1901, in the first year of the prize, when it was awarded to the founder of the Red Cross, Henri Dunant. The next expansion was the inclusion of human rights, and there are many potential candidates who could be considered the first laureate in this category. The first clear human rights prize went to Albert Luthuli in 1960, so this is not anything new either. What is new is that environmental work is now included in the peace concept. Several people have asked what the environment really has to do with Alfred Nobel's will. However, it is not difficult to link the two. Alfred Nobel's first criterion for the prize was fraternity between nations. In my opinion, you would be hard-pressed to find a clearer example of fraternity between nations than the attempts to save our planet from global warming. To do this, we all need to unite to achieve a common goal. Nobel's third criterion, the holding of peace congresses, can in itself also be said to be met in the form of the extensive environmental diplomacy taking place on many levels to save our planet. As I see it, this is an excellent example of how the committee responds to modern challenges, while also remaining loyal to Nobel's will. Anything else would quickly contribute to the growing irrelevance of the Peace Prize. Sometimes there is also discussion, particularly in Norway, of who should sit on the Norwegian Nobel Committee. The heated nature of these discussions might tempt some to believe that the committee is in trouble. This is simply not the case. On the contrary, there are more and more people who want a hand on the wheel. The committee has become too important for it to be left entirely to its own devices. It is a prestigious position to have. Over the years, I have noted that almost all the leading Norwegian politicians, at some time or other, have shown an interest in being on the committee. Luckily, there has not been room for very many of them. Most peace prizes imbue elements of both the past and future. An achievement must form the basis of the award, but the committee also hopes that the prize will contribute to new results in the future. This is not anything new either. Many of the very first prizes went to peace activists with a very limited influence on the politics of their time. This was the committee's way of expressing that it hoped their ideals would be of great influence going forwards. Some people have argued that the committee should not award any prizes until the historical process, for example in the Middle East, is complete. But history has no end. It goes on and on. Why does the world care about the Peace Prize? I think there are 4 key reasons, and perhaps a 5th, why the Nobel Peace Prize has achieved the status it has today. First, the prize is 117 years old. The very earliest prizes garnered a fair amount of attention. This gives it a significant head start on most other peace prizes, such as the Seoul Peace Prize and the Templeton Prize. Almost all of these were set up in the years following the Second World War, or even in more recent decades. Second, the Nobel Peace Prize belongs to a family of prizes, the Nobel family. The family ties bolster all involved. The Nobel Prizes have almost become a universally accepted expression of the best of what people within various professional fields can achieve. The Peace Prize also receives more attention than any of the other Nobel Prizes. In fact, in some years it has garnered more attention than all the other Nobel Prizes put together. We in Oslo are nevertheless extremely proud to be linked to the more scientific Nobel Prizes, which are awarded in Stockholm. The Peace Prize would never have gained the status it has without the other Nobel Prizes. The Peace Prize is awarded by a Norwegian committee of 5 members selected by the Norwegian Parliament, Storting, in accordance with Alfred Nobel's will from 1895. Nobel did not justify this choice, but some theories are more likely than others. It is likely that Nobel visited Norway at least once, since he owned a dynamite factory here. Nobel was a very international citizen. The country he lived in for the longest was Russia. He also lived in Paris for a long time, and it was there that he wrote his will, at the Swedish-Norwegian Club. He likely considered Norway and Sweden to be linked, which of course they were politically until 1905. So it made sense for the junior partner to award a prize as well. It is likely that Nobel, being the complex man he was skeptical of the Swedish hierarchy and historical war tradition, whereas the Norwegians were traditionally seen as more people and peace-oriented. The Norwegian Parliament's interest in mediation, arbitration, and peaceful solutions to conflicts during the 1890s probably stood out in his mind. His friend, Bertha von Suttner, kept him well informed of such matters. It may even have had something to do with Nobel's admiration of Bjørnstjerne Bjørnson, a Norwegian author who worked as a peace activist during the 1890s. A third reason for the prestige of the Nobel Prize is that the Norwegian Nobel Committee, throughout these 117 years, has established a solid record. Of course, mistakes have been made, serious mistakes. Mahatma Gandhi is in a class of his own among the omissions. It is, of course, very unfortunate that the 20th century's leading spokesman for non-violence never received the Peace Prize. It is likely that the committee had decided that Gandhi would be awarded the prize in 1948, but then he was shot, which was, of course, problematic, even though posthumous prizes were possible back then. Dag Hammarskjöld received the prize posthumously in 1961. The statutes were subsequently amended so that this was no longer possible, and this was undoubtedly the right decision. Assessing the qualifications of the living is work enough, without bringing the dead into it as well. Of course, we all have our favorites on the list of the 130 people and organizations that have received the Peace Prize, and on a corresponding list of names of people and organizations who should perhaps have received it, a topic that will be discussed in more detail later in this book. Even for an outspoken Northern Norwegian Committee Secretary, this is a touchy subject. Everyone makes mistakes. What we have to bear in mind is that very few truly significant mistakes have been made. The fourth reason is that the prize has proven to be relatively flexible. As mentioned, the peace concept has been expanded and the prize has gradually become more global, even though this has taken too long. It was only in the 1970s that the prize really became global. Eventually, women were increasingly recognized as well, and 16 women have now received the Nobel Peace Prize. There is still a way to go, but 16 women, compared to 87 men and 27 organizations, remains a better figure than for the other Nobel Prizes. 9 of these 16 women have received the Nobel Peace Prize in the last 25 years. Finally, some would perhaps claim that the large sum of prize money contributes to the status of the Nobel Prizes. But the sum of the prize money, in recent years 10 million Swedish krona, has not always been so high. As of 2012, the prize money was reduced to 8 million Swedish krona as a result of poor finances after the recession in 2008-2009. There are also peace prizes that offer greater sums of prize money than the Nobel Peace Prize. The American Templeton Prize even states in its statutes that the sum of the prize money must always be higher than it is for the Nobel Prizes. Another, the Hilton Prize, offered a significantly higher sum before they reduced it to $1 million. In a manner most un-American, they award the prize to organizations and institutions, not to individuals. This limits the media attention substantially. Why has it done so well? The answer to the question of why the Norwegian Nobel Committee has not made more serious mistakes than it actually has can be sought on a structural level. I think it is difficult to point to the individual contributions of committee chairs, committee members, or even committee secretaries as the decisive factor. There have, of course, been competent people at all of these levels, but there has also not been a lack of people with limited insight. The selection of committee members has also often been somewhat coincidental. The primary explanation can therefore probably be found on a more structural level, in the Norwegian and Scandinavian approach to international politics. Both Norwegian and Scandinavian politics come across as somewhat left-wing to the rest of the world. This is where the Peace Prize should be. It should represent a mixture of idealism and realism. The prize has to aim for a better world without losing touch with the world as it is now. One school of political science says, where you stand depends on where you sit. A peace prize awarded in the USA, as in India, in Russia, or in Saudi Arabia, would of course be completely different to the prize awarded in Norway. Idealism is pronounced in Norway's modern history, with a focus on democracy and human rights, on humanitarian aid and disarmament, and, not least, on international cooperation. The overflow from our national values is clear. Human rights are firmly established in Norway. Norway has achieved its independence, and other peoples should achieve theirs, apart from, in a Scandinavian context, the Sami people. They are better off in the existing nation-states. Anti-colonialism as an attitude is hugely popular since we have never had colonies. The Norwegian Arctic Ocean imperialism and the enormous expansion of our territorial waters were all about resources, not people. Social democracy and Christianity have bolstered our responsibility for those who have least, both nationally and internationally. Disarmament makes sense for a small country with superpowers for neighbors. It has become particularly important for us to seek an end to the weapons that we ourselves do not have, atomic weapons. Law, justice, and international cooperation have long been small nations' way of limiting the influence of superpowers in international politics. That is why there has been such a big focus on international cooperation, whether it centered on the Interparliamentary Union before the First World War, the League of Nations after the First World War, or the United Nations after the Second World War. The struggle for a better organized world is a recurrent theme through the history of the Peace Prize. Others include the emphasis on democracy and human rights, something that has gone from strength to strength. Humanitarian aid has been another focus in the history of the prize, originating as far back as the first prize awarded to Henri Dunant in 1901. Disarmament and arms control, particularly in connection with the fight against atomic weapons, is something that the Norwegian Nobel Committee kept coming back to again and again. At the same time, this idealism has been tempered by Norway's experiences as a nation-state. Idealism did not save Norway from unions with Sweden and Denmark, or from being occupied by Germany during the Second World War, or from conflict with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. If there is one concept that Norwegian politicians love, it is the concept of building bridges. Norway came to belong to the Western Bloc even as it was busy building bridges to the east. Norway became gradually more affluent in the north, but wanted to build bridges to poorer countries in the south. For a long time, Norway was a very pro-Israel country, but eventually became more involved with Arabs in general and the Palestinians in particular. Our being both inside and outside blocs might sound a bit confusing, but is actually a good basis for awarding the Peace Prize. In Scandinavia, where conflicts, at least in more recent times, have been few and relatively minor, we have an unwavering faith that organization and democracy are the way to peace, both nationally and internationally. The world should be like Scandinavia, well organized, hence all the prizes awarded to champions of the Interparliamentary Union, the League of Nations, and the UN, and democratic, hence the steadily increasing number of human rights prizes, with social justice, hence the prizes for those combating poverty, and a will to put an end to atomic weapons, which we ourselves do not have, hence all the prizes for opponents of atomic weapons. Everything is so simple here, which is why we also tend to think of everything as quite simple out in the wider world. Of course, this is a somewhat naive view, but the Peace Prize needs a dose of naivety. It is when the Peace Prize has looked to realpolitik that problems have often arisen. I mention this in relation to the prizes awarded to Theodore Roosevelt, 1906, Henry Kissinger and Lê Ducau, 1973, Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat, 1978, and Yasser Arafat, Shimon Peres, and Yitzhak Rabin, 1994, even though there are significant differences between these prizes as well. It is quite something to think that the same prize has been awarded to Mother Teresa and to Yasser Arafat. That is not to say that such realpolitik prizes should be completely avoided. Of course, this liberal idealistic tradition is not just Norwegian or Scandinavian. If that were the case, the Peace Prize would quickly have taken on a provincial air. This tradition, often referred to in English as liberal internationalism, has held a strong position in many other Western countries, particularly in the USA and the United Kingdom. This is one of the main reasons why these two countries in particular are in a class of their own when it comes to their number of Peace Prizes. The USA has 22 Peace Prize laureates, and the United Kingdom has 14. Only 5 prizes have been awarded to Germany and to France, and only 2 to the Soviet Union, Russia, Andrei Sakharov and Mikhail Gorbachev. Democracy and human rights have spread to more and more parts of the world, just as the Peace Prize has. On the other hand, the prize has challenged totalitarian and authoritarian regimes, whether it be in Germany, Karl von Ossietzky, the Soviet Union, Sakharov, Lech Wałęsa, or China, Dalai Lama, Liu Xiaobo. When it comes to the USA, it...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?